3 brutal lessons about dumbbells that rewired my brain. She stared at the dumbbells like they were strangers. Same weight, same routine, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, just exhaustion she couldn't name. Most of us pick up weights thinking we're training our bodies. We count reps, track progress, chase that burning feeling in our muscles. But what if the real transformation isn't happening in your arms at all? I thought I understood strength. I'd been lifting for months, following programs, hitting my numbers. Everything looked right on paper, but something fundamental was missing, something I couldn't see in the mirror. The first time I truly failed a set, I didn't feel defeated. I felt curious, like my body was trying to tell me something my mind refused to hear. This isn't medical advice, just what happened when I stopped treating dumbbells like tools and started seeing them as teachers. The gym that morning felt different, not the lighting or the crowd. Something internal had shifted overnight, though I couldn't explain it yet. I'd woken up thinking about a conversation from weeks earlier. A trainer had asked me a simple question. "What are you actually training?" I'd laughed it off then. Biceps, obviously. Shoulders, the usual targets. But the question lingered like an itch I couldn't scratch. Part of me still believed results came from volume alone. More weight, more sets, more time. The numbers would eventually speak for themselves. That's what everyone said. That's what I told myself every time doubt crept in. But what happened next changed everything. I picked up the same 15-pound dumbbell I'd used for weeks. This time I closed my eyes before the first curl. Not to focus on form, to notice what I'd been ignoring. The temperature of the metal, the specific pressure points in my palm, the exact moment tension began traveling up my forearm. Researchers at Stanford found something similar. When routine meets meaning, consistency finally sticks. But meaning doesn't come from understanding the exercise intellectually. It comes from feeling it completely. The weight felt heavier with my eyes closed. Not physically heavier, just more present. Like I'd been lifting ghosts of dumbbells before, going through motions without truly arriving in them. Lesson 1 hit me mid-rep. I'd been training my body while completely abandoning my nervous system. We talk about muscle memory, but we rarely discuss neural memory. The way your brain maps every movement, every sensation, building highways of communication between intention and action. I'd been driving those highways on autopilot, never questioning the route. She laughed quietly, realizing progress didn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looked like slowing down enough to feel what was actually happening. I opened my eyes and put the dumbbell down, not from exhaustion, from revelation. For months I'd been chasing external validation, definition, strength, the approval of my own reflection. But the actual experience of lifting had become invisible to me. What would you do in that moment? Keep pushing through familiar patterns or pause long enough to question why they stopped working? I decided to restart everything. Not the program, the relationship. Every exercise became an experiment in presence. Could I feel the exact second my muscle engaged? Could I sense when tension shifted from productive to protective? The second lesson emerged slower, like fog lifting. It wasn't about the weight at all, it was about the space between reps. Most training advice focuses on execution. Lift this way, breathe here, control the descent. All true, all useful. But nobody talks about the micro moments of nothing. That split second when you've completed a movement but haven't started the next one. That space felt uncomfortable at first. My brain wanted to rush through it, get to the next rep, maintain momentum. But what if momentum was actually preventing adaptation? I started adding one conscious breath in that space. Just one. Not to rest, but to reset. To let my nervous system integrate what just happened before demanding it perform again. The weights didn't get heavier. I didn't suddenly break plateaus. But something more interesting occurred. I stopped dreading my workouts. The resistance I'd been feeling wasn't physical fatigue. It was neural overwhelm. Then came the injury scare, and the real test. My shoulder started clicking during overhead presses. Nothing painful yet, just a warning. The old me would have pushed through, trusted the program, assumed my body would adapt. This version paused and asked a different question. What am I forcing? I put down the dumbbells and just moved my arm through the motion. No weight, no pressure, no agenda. And there it was. a specific angle where my shoulder blade wasn't gliding smoothly. My body had been compensating around that restriction for weeks, maybe months. Medical professionals call this compensation patterns. Your body is brilliant at working around limitations, but it keeps score. Eventually, those workarounds become injuries waiting to happen. What surprised me most wasn't just how resistance bands improved my experience with shoulder stability, but how everything started to feel different once I switched to the right method. I wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, I tested it more than a few times before I figured out what really worked. Bands allowed me to explore that sticky angle with support, rebuilding communication between my shoulder blade and brain without overriding protective tension. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference for me. I'll leave the link below if you want to explore what I mean. But the deeper lesson wasn't about bands versus dumbbells. It was about listening versus performing. The third lesson came when I realized I'd been asking the wrong question entirely. I'd spent months asking, how do I get stronger? When I should have been asking, how do I become more adaptable? Strength without adaptability is just rigidity waiting to break. And dumbbells, I discovered, were perfect teachers of adaptability if I stopped using them like hammers. Every weight is a conversation. Too light, and your nervous system doesn't engage. Too heavy, and it shuts down communication to prioritize survival. The sweet spot isn't about maxing out. It's about finding the load that keeps the dialogue open. Part of me still doubted it could work long-term. Would slowing down actually lead to progress, or was I just rationalizing weakness? 6 weeks later, I tested my 1-rep max on a curl. I'd added 5 pounds without specifically training for it. But more surprising, I didn't feel destroyed afterward. No shaking hands, no neural exhaustion, just clean fatigue and something close to satisfaction. Maybe I was chasing the wrong goal all along. Maybe the point wasn't to conquer weight, but to partner with it. Sometimes we only understand strength when it's tested by stillness instead of strain. I started noticing this principle everywhere. In conversations where listening mattered more than responding. In problems where patience outperformed force. The dumbbells had rewired something deeper than muscle. They'd rewired my approach to resistance itself. When you stop treating obstacles as enemies and start treating them as information, everything shifts. The gym became quieter, even when crowded. Not externally, internally. That constant mental chatter about performance, comparison, adequacy, it didn't disappear, but it lost urgency. I could hear it and choose not to engage. Research on neuroplasticity suggests this makes sense. When you consciously change how you relate to a repeated physical task, you're not just building muscle memory. You're pruning old neural pathways and growing new ones. The brain physically changes architecture based on attention and intention. But there was still one thing I couldn't explain. Why did this approach feel so much harder than just grinding through sets? Not physically harder, emotionally harder. Like I was giving up some kind of armor I didn't know I was wearing. The answer came during a particularly frustrating session. I'd reduced my working weight by 20% to focus on that space between reps, and my ego was screaming. Everyone around me was lifting heavier. I looked weak by comparison. Then I realized I was weak by that comparison, but I was strong by a different one that actually mattered. I could feel my body now. I could sense when to push and when to protect. I'd gained something invisible but invaluable. Agency over my own nervous system. She paused between sets, watching her reflection not with judgment but recognition. Progress had been happening all along. She'd just been measuring the wrong things. Somewhere between the failures and the quiet mornings, rhythm replaced urgency. Not the rhythm of a program or a coach's voice, but her own internal cadence, that honest conversation between effort and capacity. The dumbbells hadn't changed, the exercises hadn't changed, but the brain interpreting them had completely rewired its relationship with resistance. When she looked in the mirror again, it wasn't her reflection that had changed. It was what she believed about herself. Not stronger in the way she'd imagined, stronger in the ways that actually sustain strength. Adaptable, aware, unafraid of the signals her body sent. The shaking hands from that first morning were gone. Not because she'd conquered them, but because she'd understood them. This is what dumbbells taught me. Every rep is a choice. You can perform it, or you can experience it. Most of us spend years performing, wondering why we feel disconnected from our own progress. The moment I chose experience over performance, everything else followed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but undeniably. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.